Dr. Macro Detectors is the fastest growing manufacturer in the industry, and for good reason. Many detectorists, including Mike Hare, call us the most innovative, but we are so much more than that. We listen to and care about our customers. We also offer a wide range of detectors to fit all of your needs. Come check out all of our products today at www.noctadetectors.com. Detectors for everyone, everywhere, a lifetime.
Welcome to the UK's first metal detection podcast. It's All Metal Mode UK with your host from across the pond, Mr. Michael Hare.
Hello, everybody. This is Mike Hare, and you're listening to the All Metal Mode UK podcast with my very, very special co-host, Mr. Dave Sadler. If you're interested in any of my articles, you can check out allmetalmode.com. I have a new article about relic hunting with the 6MXI. It was a fun article. It wasn't actually my experience. I'd hoped to get back to Ohio this early spring, or earlier this spring, and I didn't make it. So a good friend of mine did some relic hunting with the 6MXI and did a fun little article. Don't forget, check out archmdmag.com. There's some great articles. I love going out there and reading those. On Facebook, you can follow us at All Metal Mode Podcast UK, Metal Detecting UK Dirt Fishing, Archaeology and Metal Detecting Magazine, and Archaeology and Metal Detecting Group. Don't forget, please tell your friends about us. Spread the word about the podcast. You can find us on Spreaker. You can listen live. You can listen anytime. You can also download off of Spreaker and listen to it on the go. iTunes, iHeartRadio, YouTube. You can find us at All Metal Mode on YouTube. And there's several other affiliates. So, please let everybody know and help us spread the word. Don't forget, if you're new or if you're listening and you've never been in chat, we have a live chat going on at the same time. Once you hit play on the show, you'll see a bar come up, and across that bar with your pause and play button and all that. And when that pops up, you can there's a chat bubble, and it just depends on what platform you're on, if you're on a phone or a computer, what have you. So, but look for that. Join us in chat, ask questions, and come join in the fun. So, Mr. Dave, how you doing?
I'm okay, Michael. How's yourself?
I'm great. I'm doing good.
I'm happy that it's actually Download Festival starts tomorrow, which is the UK's biggest rock festival, which I've been to a few times, and I can honestly say I'm glad I'm not there, because the rain that's coming down, people are actually leaving and coming home before the event's actually started. It's that bad.
That don't sound...
So there's a lot of flooded fields for the metal detectorists, so we're keeping our fingers crossed for the weather to break and the summer to actually begin properly.
Right. Is it really as rainy as over there as they say? Is it cloudy and rainy a lot?
It comes and goes, Mike. To be honest, it's like any country. You know, you get what it is. You know, you've got your hot and cold areas, the US. You've got your rainy areas, the US, and it's probably the further north you go, the closer you get to Antarctica and such like. So, I suppose in some ways it is, but we do have our good periods, but at the moment it's odd to be this wet at this time of the year in the UK, because this is our summertime starting now. And last year was about 30 degrees at this time, so
30 degrees Celsius.
Everybody can take their swimming attire out metal detecting with them.
That's funny. We got any news?
So, Michael, no, I'm not doing news. I think I'm so excited to speak to our guest tonight, and I know we've got so much to get through that I'm giving. I'll give you one or two. There was a gold Roman coin found I think it was last year. It's went up for auction in the UK last week, and it's gone for it's a gold Roman coin, and it's gone for £460,000. So if we convert that into US, we'll find out how much that is, shall we? Still there, Mike?
Yeah, no, I'm here. I'm listening.
Sorry, I thought you disappeared then.
No.
So that's £460,000 is the equivalent of $583,000.
That's it, huh?
So that's for one singular gold Roman coin. So that's all I'm going to give you. And I'm going to carry on. I'm going to introduce our guest this evening. I'm greatly looking forward with massive anticipation to speaking to Darrell Miklos, who is the star of, most people will know him as the star of Discovery Channel's Cooper's Treasure. Obviously, there's lots of other things that he'll be well known for. And obviously, welcome to the show, Darrell. It's fantastic to speak to you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I love the UK, love the US, love treasure.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. In the UK, there's some of the things that we're finding, predate AD. We're going back to BC with a lot of things that are being found, and it's fantastic. And in the future, perhaps you could come up with potentially a UK show that you could come along and do that over here, maybe.
I would love to. Send me an opportunity. I'll be there in a heartbeat.
We'll certainly try. So, so straight into it, Darrell. Obviously, your father was a treasure hunter, Roger Miklos, and I take it that's where your career in treasure hunting stemmed from.
Yeah, it absolutely did. It was back in the late 60s. My father moved our family from California to Florida for a couple years, and he gave a shot at treasure hunting. He read a magazine article when he was ill in the West Coast, and the magazine article was talking about Kip Wagner, a very famous treasure hunter who mistakenly was throwing rocks back in the ocean, and soon found out he was tossing back silver pieces of 8. From that story, my dad got interested and said, "We're moving to Florida," just on a whim like that.
That's awesome. So how many years were you in Florida?
Well, we were there for a couple years, I think about 2 years, and my dad followed suit like Kip Wagner did, and he'd take my whole family, me and my 3 sisters and my mom, and say, "Go ahead and comb the beach. Any black rocks that you guys find, give them to me. I'll give you a quarter." So we collected as many black rocks for the quarters and made a few dollars each that day, or those days. Back then, pieces of 8 were just laying all over the beaches. And I think one time my dad was out there either with us or just my mom, and he ran into Kip Wagner, met him, and they became pretty decent friends. And through that, he began building a relationship with Kip, and they got started as he opened up a company called Caribbean Ventures, or Nomad Treasure Seekers at that time, and then bought a boat, set out with my uncle to start treasure hunting and looking for shipwrecks.
Amazing. So that was late 60s, early 70s. You're giving away your age, obviously. Yeah, I thought you were a lot younger. I thought you were a few years older than me. From there, you obviously you got the passion, you got the bug. Now, interestingly, you in your show, quite often there's a piece with your father comes on when he's on the television program with Gordon Cooper, who we'll come to shortly. Honestly, I come on telly and I thought, I remember that. My dad was metal detectorist. He passed away a number of years ago. I can actually remember that television program or clips of it airing in the UK back in the late 70s, early 80s. So when I saw that on Cooper's Treasure, I was astounded. I thought, gosh, this is somebody yourself who's come from somebody who I've seen on telly years ago. So this is what mesmerised me with the programme. Obviously, everything else that transpired through the series this was the thing that gripped my attention most. I love the idea of the programme. I love the concept of it. I love the information regarding Gordon Cooper, but it was that link between your father and you and my father and me that really grabbed me. So that's where my passion comes from and my obvious excitement to speak to you tonight. So obviously growing... that's no problem at all. Obviously, therefore, growing up, you were on a number of excursions with your dad. I read somewhere, I'm not 100% sure, in around 1970, you stowed away on one of his hunts.
Yeah, that was, I used to watch my dad and my uncle go out and get the boat prepared when they would, they originally got a job looking for spent booster rockets off the Cape Canaveral at the time. If they were to find one and turn the coordinates over to the government, they would get paid for giving the coordinates back to the government so they could retrieve the booster rockets. And it was on one of those retrievals that they found their first shipwreck. And when they found their first shipwreck, my dad and my uncle were just super excited. I could see the emotion in their faces, and I really wanted to go with them. So I kept trying to be helpful at the dock, but he'd never let me leave the dock on the boat ride with them. So one day I stowed away, and I was in the galley in the cupboards, and my uncle came in and heard some noise, and he opened the galley or the cupboard and found me in there vomiting. And my dad came and said, "What the hell are you doing in here?" And literally threw me in the water and says, "If you want to be a treasure hunter, you better be able to swim back to this boat." And so I swam back to the boat, and he let me go out just for that one day. But later on, that would spawn into me being able to go out with him on a regular basis. But that's how it all started. Wasn't exactly the way I would have liked it to start, but that's how I got involved. I had to sneak in with my dad.
So of all that period of time when you were going out with your father and your uncle, what was the first shipwreck that you were actually involved in, or the first, as we'll call it, mission for ease of use?
I worked, there was the Capitana wreck near the Keys. I worked on the 1715 fleet. My dad met through Kip Wagner a gentleman named Mel Fisher, who I'm sure you've heard of, who discovered the Nuestra Senora de Atocha, the 1622 shipwreck that yielded about $400 million near the Marquesas Keys, just southwest of Key West. And through that, my dad would take me out to various locations in the Keys and the Treasure Coast right there off of Florida. And we worked several different types of shipwrecks, from the 1733 fleet, 1715 plate fleet. I even got a chance to be trained by working in a separate lease area with my dad, which he acquired looking for the Atocha. At the time, my dad had broken up his friendship with Mel Fisher and applied for his own lease out in the Marquesas Keys near the quicksands, and we went out there, and it was really tense, but I got some really good training in, and I must have worked about 12 different wreck sites, all Spanish colonial period wrecks, from the late 1600s or early 1600s to the late 1700s. And that's how I started. And from there, we ended up going to Turks and Caicos.
So of all these opportunities that you had, obviously, I'm sure you've seen thousands of fantastic artifacts, fantastic sites. In that early years, what would be the most memorable thing that you actually brought to the surface?
Well, at one point, I mean, there were so many different instances, and when I go back that far, my memory they all kind of blend together. But I guess one of my most memorable ones was diving in the Turks and Caicos with my father in charge, and actually touching artifacts that related to the Columbus fleet,
Wow.
an early Pinzon wreck. And in fact, we followed up on some leads with regards to Pinzon in season 1 of Cooper's Treasure. But prior to season 1, 30 years prior, we were out there working a wreck site, and it yielded incredible artifacts related to that early colonial footprint in the Americas. And I thought that, to me, that was probably the most impressive as far as shipwrecks go because of the history attached to it.
Uh-huh. That's fascinating. And then moving on through the years, you've obviously worked hard. You've learnt your craft. You've obviously took diving exams and such like. I'm sure you're recognised, able to use the boats and whatnot. And we come to yourself through your father meeting up with Gordon Cooper.
Yeah, it was several years later. It was kind of a tumultuous thing, the relationship I had with my father, because when we were out in the Turks and Caicos in the Bahamas, not Turks and Caicos and the Marquesas Keys wreck, where we were looking for the Atocha, my dad ended up acquiring a young lady or girlfriend while still married to my mom, and that really ticked me off. And so, in fact, so much so my dad made me fake that I was just a crew member rather than his son. And it kind of ended in a negative way after the Turks and Caicos find. My parents got divorced. I hadn't seen my dad for many years. And he came back in the early 90s, tried to reassociate himself with my mom. She wanted nothing to do with him by then because of the way he ended the marriage. And then he disappeared again for about 7 years. And it was in 1997, he called me out of the blue and said, "Look, Darrell, I know I've treated you like crap. I know you put your heart and soul into working with me on several wrecks growing up as a kid, but now you're a little older. I'm starting to ramp up a new wreck, a permit in the Bahamas, but I need you to do me a favor if you're willing, and I'd like you to go pick up astronaut Gordon Cooper. You may remember him, and fly to the Bahamas together." And because he told me that astronaut Gordon Cooper was to be involved, I immediately jumped at the opportunity. I was still angry, obviously, at my father for the way things went down with my mom. But I jumped ahead at the opportunity, and I brought Gordon there. And from that point on, that was the moment that changed my life, because I was able to bond with Gordon while we were there in the Bahamas, albeit we were unsuccessful in obtaining a salvage lease because of a moratorium put in place by the government. I ended up coming back to California with him and sharing an office, and that was the beginning of a really strong relationship between Gordon and myself.
And obviously, Gordon sadly passed away a few years ago, and your friendship obviously continued until he passed away. And am I right in saying that he was originally the Mercury 7 astronaut, and it was the Faith flight in around 1963, which went around 25 times around the Earth, and he was clicking away the camera, doing the job that he was supposed to be doing, but at the same time, he began coming up with anomalies beneath the water.
Well, what happened was that Gordon was a treasure hunter. He was an avid treasure hunter because he befriended Kip Wagner, and now this is during his training period in the Cape. And way before he was in space, he was already a seasoned treasure hunter, having worked with Kip Wagner and the people that Kip worked with. So he knew prior to going on his first flight that he was going to have a bird's eye view that no one else was ever given, with the knowledge that he had as far as treasure hunting and the routes that these early colonial shipwrecks took. So he knew exactly where he was looking. He ID'd from space, and he had 2010 vision. He had the state-of-the-art camera equipment at the time. And they were even using a crude version of a magnetometer in space. I don't know how helpful that was, because I think they were just experimenting with it, but he was able to jot down certain coordinates of areas in the Caribbean, the Bahamas, Florida, all the way down to South America, Central America, the Gulf of Mexico, up the coast of Georgia to the Carolinas, and jot down certain areas of interest. When he got back from his space flight and received all the accolades for the space flight, he got together with his buddies, put together a sea chart, which we coined the treasure map from space, and he circled and highlighted these areas that he noted having been in space, and he compared that with the photography that he took, and then he went with his treasure hunting buddies and investigated those areas and each circled area represented several thousand square miles of ocean, but they needed to pinpoint certain areas, so they did. And Gordon knew exactly what the thoroughfares were at those times in the route, and he knew the potential of ships running aground certain reefs. So what he was looking for while he was in space were dark areas in shallow water that looked like reef zones that could be potential hazards for ships passing through. And he knew that, hey, I know that's going to be fantastic. And then he was able to actually ID some shipwreck material from space. But in order to really verify whether it's of a colonial period, you'd have to investigate it off of a boat or an airplane. And that's what he did. And he went to each one and did his own investigation with his buddies.
And obviously technology then was a lot different what it is today with what you've been able to utilize during the 2 seasons.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I always amazed that how he was able to get and acquire the information. It took a lot more groundwork than it takes us, but even still today, the ocean is an incredible difficult space to work in. You have so many different factors working against you. You're literally working in a fluid environment, and you've got currents, you've got conditions, you've got reefs, you've got weather patterns, you've got all sorts of things working against you. It's a very difficult environment to work in, even if you've got state-of-the-art equipment. But I'm always amazed that he was able to gather as much information between his Mercury and Gemini flights as he did, and be so accurate. And the rewards for me have been the ability to find several hundred shipwrecks based on a lot of that information. Now, not everybody, I don't want everybody to think that we found out of 100 shipwrecks, there was 100 shipwrecks filled with treasure, because that's just not the case, because they weren't all carrying treasure on them. But you get a good 5, maybe 6, 7, maybe up to 10%, depending on the area. In the circled areas that he did on his chart, you'd find shipwrecks with treasure or commercially valuable artifacts. But each one tells its own story, and they didn't use credit cards back then, so even a merchant ship was carrying something of value on it.
And you've been able to follow up on a lot of them and actually find the information of the boat itself and what it would be carrying via reports that are out there from historically as well.
Yeah, if you go to the archives of the Indies in Seville and the Maritime Museum in London, which is you're probably familiar with there in Greenwich, or Greenwich, the information, there's lots of information out there that pertains to these vessels, especially in Spain. Spain kept extremely good records of which ships were sent out. And in fact, when I was in Spain investigating the colonial route down in southern Turks and Caicos, the director of the museum there told me that all the archival data that they have from the past 400 years that Spain-built ships would line up paper-wise, would stack up 42 kilometers.
Wow.
So that was a lot of ships that were built during those 400 years. Just
phenomenal amount.
Yeah. It's crazy. And
then obviously you have to pick through the bones of everything too. Obviously your role in this is that of a treasure hunter. and obviously I've noted on the show, obviously you have the archaeologists involved and such like, and they obviously assist and whatnot. But at the end of the day, you're looking for the shipwrecks of value. But I'm sure in the meantime, you've also been able to add historical data to what is previously unknown regarding the ships that are there.
Of course. I mean, out of the shipwrecks that we found on season 1, which is about 60, we were able to turn over a lot of that data to the host country, and they kept the data that they otherwise wouldn't have information to. And, it's not all about the money for me. It really isn't. I enjoy the exploration. I enjoy the journey. I enjoy the hunt. Now, granted, we do love looking for treasure. That goes on. I'm not going to deny that, but I enjoy all the aspects of treasure hunting, and whether we find a shipwreck that pertains to treasure or not, it's still exciting to me just to uncover a piece of history and to be able to share that information. And that's what drives me.
Mm-hmm. So the whole
if it was only money that drove me, then unfortunately, that's more or less what my dad was about. But I tried to take the other avenue and be interested in the historical part of it too, which Gordon taught me.
Yeah. So what we see on TV obviously is a very, very minute part of the whole everything that you do, and there's a hell of a lot more work goes into it, I presume, than what again we see. There's a much bigger team. There's a much bigger team behind the scenes, being able to do the research, being able to accurately document, accurately investigate everything that you find.
Yeah, well, you're only given, I don't know about in the UK, you guys were lucky. You actually got an extra 7 minutes per episode than we did here in the US, or 6 minutes. But to put in each episode here in the U.S. was only 42 minutes. And in 42 minutes, it's hard to give every detail away of how much work we had to put in just to uncover and get the information that we were able to obtain in 42-minute episodes. So, and it was a learning process to try to get as much information out in that limited amount of time to the audience. So in season 2, it was a little bit different. It was more of a tutorial trying to explain to the people how treasure hunting operates. It was kind of like the ABC's or Treasure Hunting 101. Find an area, work that area, follow a trail, go between artifacts, see how they tie in, try to separate certain artifacts from different periods and origins, follow a complete trail, look for a final deposit or ballast that would eventually lead you to an area that you can excavate for potential treasure find.
And that was fascinating in season 2, the fact that you actually did find one particular shipwreck and were able to follow the whole course of it throughout the entire season until obviously you found what the last episode shown.
Yeah, that was the whole idea. Now I do want to let people know that the area in which was shown on television wasn't actually the area we were working in. And we did that to protect the wreck because in season 1 we were too close to home. And so, but the story is as it was. We put together, we must have filmed in 4 different areas in the Bahamas and located, maybe 50, 60 wrecks there as well. And we had to pick one in particular that would be of most interest to the public. And then we found that one area and we said, look, we're on a good trail here. Let's follow it and let's teach the audience exactly how we do that. And that was the difference between season 1 and 2 mostly.
So what time period were you actually in that area for season 2? Obviously we can't tell if it's a week, if it's 3 weeks, if it's 3 months. What was the actual?
It's 8 weeks exactly as it was stated in the show.
Right.
And for us to found that, see, what people think is maybe we only found 1 or 2 shipwrecks, and because we did show where we ran into a metal wreck, a more modern wreck, and we pushed that one aside and just made note of it and documented it, but we moved on to earlier colonial period shipwrecks. And I think in season 2, it showed or showcased 3 particular wreck sites, but in actuality, during the course of filming, we found close to 60. So and to find 60 shipwrecks in 8 weeks' time was a pretty amazing feat. And to find something related to treasure in that short amount of time, because you take that 8-week period, you can cut that in half and wait for production people to get in the water first, get the boats and cameras set up, the drones and all of this equipment to be set up. You've only got 4 weeks of time to find a shipwreck, and not only find a shipwreck, but find one with treasure, and hope that you're doing this, because what we were really doing is we were really on a hunt. We had data. It's not like we found the treasure first and then said, okay, we're going to come back here and this will be the last scene in the show. No, you were following real footsteps. It may not have been as linear as in real life, but you were following us as we were trying to put the clues together. And that part was pretty damn well done as far as I'm concerned. And I think the audience was able to learn something from it, which is what I felt good about.
Again, fascinating. What a friend of mine, Alex Savage, he's a metal detectorist. He's an archaeologist, and he's recently started, I think he's actually completed his courses in diving. So I know he's going to be taking on, he's actually been offered his first role on a shipwreck. I'm not sure where it is, but he's very excited, and he's also, a big fan of yourself as well. He mentions you quite regularly. He asked me today, and somebody else has asked me today to ask you: is there going to be a season 3?
Well, there's not going to be a season 3 of Cooper's Treasure, and it won't be on Discovery Channel. And there was they decided not to renew it. Not allowed to get into the details as of why, but
obviously
we are in the process of putting together another show that relates more to my personal life and my venture after Cooper's. Mm-hmm. So it's about data that I was able to collect with my crew, and you'll see a lot of the same crew members on the show and a few new ones. Unfortunately, we're not allowed to call the show Cooper's Treasure because Discovery Channel owns that name now. Yeah. And so it'll be another show, but it'll be very similar type of content, and it'll be as exciting as ever. And it'll come out soon, and I will make an announcement when I'm allowed to legally to tell people where it's going to be and how they can view it. But yes, it's going to be something exciting. I'm not going to give up. I want to continue to tell my story. That
is great news. I'm so glad to hear that. Real quick, we have a question. I'm sorry I've been on mute. I keep coughing. Sorry, guys. This is a great question.
You're still coughing.
Yeah, I know. I thought I was done.
I'm kidding.
I love this, and I'm sure not in the beginning, but I'm wondering if it ever does, once it's coming to completion or anything. Mike asked, does any of the data from what is found and recorded is it ever put on a database that is available to access for viewing online?
Well, unfortunately, we're at the mercy of the host country, and what they do with that data, because they own that data, and once we turn it over to them, I would love to be able to say absolutely they've got this information so that you can access it and see what it is that we found and talk about the stories and the history of that particular shipwreck, its origins, or as much information as we were able to gather from that. But the thing is those countries aren't prepared. I'll be honest with you, they haven't prepared anything. So it's unfortunate, and that's why at least we got to show to you on the television show. But this is, again, goes back to a battle that I have with, the management of information after the fact. And not that I'm angry at the Bahamas, but I wish that they were able to share more of the information, and hopefully they'll work their way around to getting organized in that fashion where they can. Again, one of the things that I mentioned on the other show is permissions to do this type of work is very difficult, and there's lots of red tape, and the red tape continues all the way through the whole process as to how much information gets out there and who's in charge of disseminating that. And once you turn over the information to the host country, it's their job, not ours, basically because they own the material, and it's up to them on how they wish to disseminate it, unless we assist them. But then they have to want assistance, and this is an ongoing, long, arduous process to get to that point where everybody has access to that info.
The law around shipwrecks is in different territories, and the license, etc., and the fines. What's the process like for this?
It's kind of like your worst nightmare, to be honest with you. Unfortunately, a lot of people think that the raising finances for expeditions is the most difficult, albeit it's up there at the top. The number one most difficult part of shipwreck hunting is obtaining permits, and that's getting harder and harder every year. And I talked about this on the last podcast that I did with Mike, just how difficult that process is, and you're working against certain organizations that just don't want that to happen. They're really working against private venture companies or treasure hunting companies like ourselves. They're looking to close down the business. And it's going to happen. There's no doubt about it. They're winning the war. At first, it was a small battle, and we won a few battles. But to win the war is going to be very difficult because they have a bigger machine and a lot more money to throw at it, and they have a way of spinning it in such a way that private venture companies look bad in the public eye. And unfortunately, they've set out lots of rules and regulations, so much so that they make any new applicant that wants to start a venture, they make it them throw in the towel going, oh my God, that's a nightmare. I'll never be able to complete all of that for the permit process. If you're lucky enough to get a permit, you'd be lucky to get past the survey phase in most cases, because by the time you've got that information, they make you go through all these other hoops just to get to the salvage phase. And a lot of things are changing, and not for the better, unfortunately. And I try to preface this, and I'll try and do it less long-windedly as I did before. I'm trying to bridge that gap to see if there's a way possible for private companies to work with these institutions, academic institutions, and or government organizations, to see if they can learn to work together. But it's a very, very hard task at hand. So unfortunately, it's difficult.
In the UK, metal detecting wise, there's a lot of competition to get exclusive rights to metal detect on properties throughout the country. Obviously, you're a prominent person within your field. You're well known because obviously the TV and other factors. Are there a lot of other people who employ a similar thing to yourself, and let's call them competition?
Is there a lot of competition between our groups?
No. Competition for yourself. When you're diving on a wreck, for instance, is the competition from other similar, I'm going to call them treasure hunters, although I don't like to use that term. Is there a lot of, treasure hunting vessels similar to yourself in the same areas, etc.? Is it,
Well, it's a strange thing, because I'll use the Bahamas for an example to better help understand what I'm trying to say. There's at least 18 to 24 applicants that are looking to get permits in various different parts of the Bahamas Islands. I think the government has planned to approve 5 of those 24 applicants. So there is a lot of people that are applying, but even then, since 1997, when I first went there to get a lease permit with Gordon, with somebody who had a name and a reputation like Gordon did, it was still impossible. So in the Bahamas, prior to us getting permit to do what we did in the Bahamas, no one has, as of yet, has able to garner a permit in the Bahamas. There is a lot of competition between treasure hunters, but it's such a big area. Most of the claimants or applicants have their own claim to different areas. But if one person did get a permit, you're always going to have somebody watching you from afar. I mean, on the Treasure Coast in Florida, where there's several subcontractors working looking for the 1715 plate fleet, where there's supposedly $400 million left that no one's accounted for. They watch each other. It's very competitive between them, even though each one has their own section cordoned off that they work. Everybody's watching what the other person's doing. Everybody's it's a very competitive field, and one's always trying to outdo the other. In some ways, competition works in a good way that way, but yeah, it's super competitive.
And has this been an issue? Has this been an issue for yourself? Obviously, with the TV program, has this been an issue with people watching you more so they can challenge your position in that area?
Yeah, well, look, I can tell you this. Yes, there's been an issue. Once we aired the show in the Bahamas, there was a lot of applicants that were very angry at the Bahamian government for giving us that permit. And there was a lot of fallout. There were a lot of people that were going, oh, why would you give it to that guy? He's just a TV guy from California. He's not a real treasure hunter. I mean, look, you're going to get people who will put you in a negative light no matter how well you do it. And I thought we did a pretty damn good job at showing people what it was that the world of treasure hunting is like and how difficult of a process it is. And yes, there was a big fallout with the other applicants because everybody got angry at the government for letting us do that. And the government didn't, they felt pressure like, oh my God, now how do we control this? Everybody's angry at us. Well, the honest truth is everybody was angry at them anyway because nobody had done anything to actually deal with these applicants for the past 20 years. So the first one out there is always going to catch the most guff from their competitors.
Danger for me, obviously, I've never been diving in any way, shape or form. I wish I had because the archaeology below the sea, it's equal to what we're finding on land. There's obviously danger and risk to yourself going below the water. And there's also, obviously, in that area, I think I've seen one of the episodes where you were approached by another boat which could have ended up quite badly. What is the most dangerous position that you've been in?
When I was young, we were working in an area, again, thank God for technology because this helps us today, whereas before it was a lot more dangerous because you could literally get shot at sea and they could drop you in the ocean and nobody would ever find you because by the time anybody got word that there was a boat missing, there's so many different types of technological advances that help us in those instances. But we've had people follow us. I can't go into the details of when and where exactly, but there were certain instances that we were being chased by gunboats near the Dominican Republic. Just pirates at sea just found out what we were doing. They heard through the locals. There was treasure hunters out in the water, and we were followed. First, we would see them trailing off in the distance, and then one day they were really brazen, and they followed us, and then we immediately pulled up the gear out of the water and started moving out, and then they started to chase, and it was pretty nail biting, and but that doesn't happen very often now unless you're in a really remote area. But even then, even when we were shooting the show, there were people off in the distance, somebody local, a competitor was watching us from a distance, and they would probably had binoculars and listening devices to try and get as much information as they could, or they'll send out a local fisherman that appears to be only fishing out in the area, and he's probably getting paid several $100s just to feedback information if they see anything. Or one of the most dangerous parts about it is if you're on a site and you're working and then a boat comes up to you out of nowhere like this one guy did in the Bahamas, all he has to do is save the GPS coordinates on his boat secretively, and then he goes, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to disturb you guys. Okay, I'll let you go. And he takes off and disappears, all he has to do is go back to that safe GPS coordinate and dive on it when we're not there. And you can't stay on the water 100% of the time in each area. So there's lots of risks involved, and it does get pretty precarious at times. And I'm not even talking about weather situations. That's just people.
And what about weather situations? What environmental conditions have changed rapidly that have brought you into potential danger?
Well, the conditions haven't changed much. That's one of the things that I always am amazed at. No matter how much the technology has advanced, when I'm in the water, it feels the same as it did in the late 60s when I was a little boy. Nothing as far as the fluid conditions of the water and currents and wind and things change, but you do get advance warning with technology today that otherwise you wouldn't have had back in the 80s, because in the 80s, I was caught in the middle of hurricanes on our way back from a site heading back to base. And we almost lost our lives. We almost lost a captain. We almost sunk a ship. We caught fire in the galley and in between so we're in between two hurricanes, or two cyclones actually at that time. One was coming from one direction. One was coming from another. Boat was taking on water over the bow. The water breached the bow, went into a vent that down to the galley, shorted out the stove or something in the galley. And next thing I know, we had a huge fire in the galley, and we're going through 30-foot seas. And the worst thing you could do is be on fire in the middle of a storm. That was pretty hairy. There's been lots of instances like that I've been through. And geez, in my career hunting, it's mostly changing, going back to home base. Funny enough, it's never been really that bad actually on site, other than sharks and all of a sudden a squall coming out of nowhere. But the real danger was going to and from.
You're a braver man than I'll ever be. Obviously,
well, I can't say I wasn't scared. I was really scared, because of almost all these really bad situations that have occurred in my life is when I was young, and I knew my mom was like freaking out at home, telling my dad, "You can't take our son out there. You're going to kill him."
As I'm sure Mrs. Miklos does herself now, your wife.
Yeah, she does. I mean, there's lots of situations that have happened where my wife is going, "Oh my God, I can't believe you're doing this." She probably wishes I had a different career choice in mind, but I'm stuck in it now.
And I'm sure there's plenty of occasions you've not told her.
There's been a lot of instances about things I haven't told her.
Hey,
she's standing behind you now with the rolling pin.
Yeah, exactly.
We got a quick question, and I think it's a good question. Something I've always wondered: is it hard to learn to dive?
I'll be honest with you. I was a surfer before I was a diver. I grew up a surfer because I grew up in Laguna Beach, California. I surfed every day before school, after school, and sometimes during school. And I thought, oh my God, this diving thing, that's going to be easy. So I started out at like 12, 13, 14, and I would dive. But I'll never forget my first time breathing through a regulator underwater. I was scared like nobody's business. And the fact that I was scared me even more. I'm going, oh my God, I've caught 15-foot waves, and here I am scared to breathe underwater. But sooner rather than later, I became accustomed to it, and I really loved it. The only thing about diving diving, you just have to be so aware of your surroundings. You have to have a total respect for water, knowing that it's not where you're supposed to be, unless you're a fish or a seafaring mammal. You have to respect your environment, and you have to be completely aware of your surroundings, because the moment you forget that and you take it for granted is when an accident is most likely to happen. And it happens to the best of us. I recently in season 1, Mike, our mag specialist, dropped a buoy on a target, and it was on the edge of a contour that dropped off into a seawall. And I couldn't locate an artifact, and Mike's dead. He's always dead on. When he drops a buoy, the marker's right there within 6 inches or 6 feet of the target, and I couldn't find it. And I said, "Are you sure it's down there?" He goes, "Yeah, it's right there on the edge." And so I said, "Well, maybe it fell off the edge." So I went down, and I kept going down the edge. Before I knew it, it was at 210 feet on a single tank of air. And here I am, a guy who's done thousands of dives in his life, and I just got caught up in the moment looking for the target and the beauty of the surroundings of the seawall. And I forgot, oh my God, I've only got a single tank of air and I'm at 210 feet. What the frick am I doing down here?
Darrell, how long does a tank of air, a tank of that air last generally?
Well, it depends. Yeah, it depends on the diver. Some people breathe more than others. Generally 45 minutes. But see, the thing is I needed time to decompress.
Yeah.
And I didn't give myself enough time. And it was pretty touch and go. And luckily, I timed it right. I'm talking to you today, so I still seem to have most of my faculties with me. At least my wife might not say that, but I do. And I came back just in time, and I just followed the bubbles up and tried to stop in certain stages where you're supposed to decompress and you wait a couple minutes at each stage. I just lucked out. But getting caught up in the moment like that is something you have to be very well prepared for, because had I had a hose leak or my PCD automatically filled up with air, which has happened to a lot of really seasoned deep water divers, and you go to the surface so quick that you basically blow up like a overinflated balloon, and anything could have happened to me, and especially I could have run out of air or got narcosis, the bends, from coming up too quickly. And there's, like I say, you just have to be smart and think about your surroundings constantly. So luckily for me, we work mostly shallow wrecks, so I prefer that. It's a lot less cost attached or associated with shallow shipwreck hunting versus deep water shipwreck hunting. And you can stay down there virtually all day at the depths that we work, because we've worked wrecks in 6 feet of water. Our average depth of water is, 6 to 45 feet. And at those depths, you can work all day almost.
Still braver man than I am. So have you ever actually had the bends?
I haven't. I've never had it. I've known people to have it, but I've never had it. I've been lucky. Like I said, that was the closest I probably came to getting the bends.
Yeah.
I remember one time, maybe 20 years ago, I was down, and I was pleasure diving, and I was just amazed with some of the beauty I was seeing down there. And I was at 85 feet, and I had no air left. And again, just irresponsible diver. And I had to go straight up from 85 feet down and exhaling all the way. And I thought that I would have got some sort of the bends or something, but nothing, not even a headache. I just lucked out. But those are the two instances in my life. I'm much more aware of it now, especially after that last 210-foot dive, which only happened a few years ago.
Yeah.
So.
And I take it the aquatic life, obviously Bahamas and such like, I've never been to, or probably never be able to go to. But the aquatic life while you're down there is, I suppose, that's something special.
It is. I tell people who've never dived before, scuba dived anyway, that it's the closest thing that you'll come to flying, because you feel like you're flying, and in slow motion. And it's just the most amazing feeling. And the surroundings are so surreal, because everything is so different than the world that we live in as humans up here on the surface. There's a whole different planet down there. It's almost as though you're on a different planet. And it's just so beautiful. And especially if you're diving in areas like the Caribbean, Bahamas, Turks and Caicos, anywhere in the Caribbean, even certain parts of Florida, Hawaii, and any of these clear water areas, the underwater sea life is just mesmerizing. I never get enough of it. I just love the water. I probably was born with gills and just don't know it.
So, of the equipment you use, this is a metal detecting show primarily. What metal detectors do you use on the show, or have you used on the show?
We for the underwater stuff, we used Excaliburs, and we used Garrett for some of the land stuff. I'm not a huge metal detector specialist. The guys that I worked with were, but they're an incredible tool. I love metal detecting. I love what you can find with it. Without a metal detector, we would be lost, because when we locate a particular area, we first do a grid pattern with a magnetometer, which only picks up iron, the magnetics from iron anomalies. And then once you drop markers on those targets, you have to use metal detectors. And metal detectors are probably the most important tool we have, because in most cases, the material is going to be buried under some sort of substrate or sand. And the only way you're going to be able to find it is with a metal detector. So they're probably one of the most incredible tools ever invented. And I love it. I love using metal detectors, and the business would be nowhere without them. That's for sure.
Yeah, you had some fascinating finds on the show. The other one that always gets me, the little submersible that you have when you're bobbing around in that. It's fascinating because you're inside, but you're in the water, and it's some of the things that we can see again are fantastic.
Oh yeah, it was amazing, because that was my first time ever using a submersible. And not only that, if you notice in the show in the second season, we actually put a metal detector on the mechanical arm of the submersible. And I think we're one of the first people to ever do that. And I thought it was ingenious. I think Mike came up with that idea. And it was wonderful, because we were able to dive deep water targets, which, obviously for obvious reasons, increase diver safety. And to be able to identify artifacts and come up close to them with a metal detector attached to a submersible, I think I've never seen anybody else do it. And to be able to use a submersible and get that bird's eye view, because you're literally sitting in an enclosed sphere of glass, and you almost have 100% visibility around you. Now, one of the things is that you're kind of like floating in a magnifying glass, and so you do lose a little bit of depth perception, but the visibility and the things you see from that depth and in a submersible, and you're so much more comfortable because you don't have to be in fear of, okay, do I have to go? How much time do I have left? I got to decompress. None of that runs through your mind. You're just sitting there enjoying this absolute beauty. It was absolutely wonderful. God, if anybody ever gets a chance to use one, just do it. It's an experience. It was one of those things on my bucket list I got to check off a few times. It was amazing.
One question that I've been dying to ask you, if you're willing to talk about it. I previously to founding the Archaeology and Metal Detecting magazine, I was a parapsychologist, so I was dealing in the paranormal, ufology and such like. And there is suggestion you may have found something in the Bahamas potentially unworldly.
Well, look, that article kind of got misinterpreted. The actual find, when we were testing the submersible, we dropped it off in an area where there was a X marks the spot, and we thought there was shipwreck material there. So we went down about 300 feet, and we actually identified something that looked unnatural. At first, we thought it was shipwreck material, but it was it was way too covered with too much coral to have been shipwreck material, because if it was the colonial period, it would have disintegrated because it's organic. If it was a type of figure that was covered with metal from a modern wreck, there wouldn't have been that much coral growth on it. So what we really believe we discovered is remnants of what appears to be an ancient civilization. It could have been, but at those depths, that this civilization would be somewhere between 16 and 20,000 years old, because we found several examples. And after reviewing what we had seen that one time, we saw a linear projectile coming out of a seawall that stuck out about 50 feet. Totally unnatural because there's an ongoing Gulf Stream there that never ends. And if it was organic growth of the coral would have bent back towards the wall as it grew out because of the ongoing current. So we believe that coral is covering something related to maybe a crumbled or fallen down structure. I found out through Robert, the submersible owner and operator, was in that area previously and actually had located several anomalies very similar to that. Very strange looking circular rings sticking out of the seawall, formations that looked like foundations of buildings, roads that looked like they were purposely laid out between those foundations. So what we really think we've discovered is something rather amazing. And if it's proven, we want to go back. We're setting up an expedition to go back, whereby we investigate that area and do it in a scientific manner, where we're going to collect. We're going to assume to take some core samples. We're going to use 3D bathymetry, side scan sonar, and we're going to do a drain the oceans type of effect to see what it is that we can't see with the naked eye, and with this utilizing this software. Then we'll go down again with divers and submersibles, collect core samples, run that through to find out what those objects that we discovered down there are actually made of. And if it's proven that they're not nature made and they're made from man, we may have stumbled on one of the oldest civilizations ever discovered. And that's what that really is. And to me, that's just as exciting as, some of the stories said that I found an alien spaceship. Mm-hmm. To me, that's just as exciting as that. But that's what that really is. And this could tie back to a story, the mythological story of the lost city of Atlantis. Mm-hmm. How do you know if you found the lost city of Atlantis unless you find the sign that says "Welcome to the lost city of Atlantis"? What is the lost city of Atlantis? Right now, it's just a mythological story. How do you prove it? I don't know. But what I do think that we've stumbled on there is something that's massive, because the area that this stretches out goes on for 10 miles. And if you're getting 10 miles worth of rectangular and right angle features that resemble building foundations with apparent roads meandering through, and linear projectiles everywhere in these strange shaped rings that have no resemblance to anything made by nature that I've ever seen in my thousands of dives in my lifetime, I think we're onto something that could be change the way history's been written.
That's interesting.
So that's what I think that's pretty damn exciting still. Mm.
Well, obviously the reason I asked you that question is because if you put Darrell Miklos in a search engine, that is one of the first ones that come up. And obviously I know what the media can do. I know how media can change anything to suit. And that's why I asked the question. You've obviously explained it brilliantly. And yes, it is mythology and folklore. But if it isn't mythology and folklore and is to be found, then I hope you do find something of consequence there.
Well, I'm telling you what. It's one of my goals in life to undergo an investigation in that area, and not only do it in a way that is respectful, but something that we can substantiate with proof, scientific proof, that there is an ancient civilization down there. And if we found an ancient civilization that dates back to 20,000 years old, I think that's a pretty incredible thing to find. Much older than the Olmec, Aztec, Inca, and Mayan civilizations. We're talking about something that predates Stonehenge and Egypt, mm-hmm. and all of those other civilizations. If we can prove that, and based on our experience, and I'm talking about working with the top cream of the crop scientists around the world to investigate this area. If we come back with the findings that we think we're going to come back with, it's going to be a heck of a discovery. And going to have many legs to it. First things first, do it in stages. Prove that it's man-made material. Once you do that, find out the origins, find out where these people came from, who were these people, how big was the civilization, how long did that civilization flourish, what happened to that civilization, and then where did they come from? And those are the things that we're going to have to do in stages.
It's certainly, it's definitely history altering. If that is the case.
Absolutely.
I want to tell you guys something that you might both be interested in. On the American show, I've had Dorian Cook on many times. He's a detectorist. He's a historian. He's been over to Palestine and Israel several times, and he's done archaeology over there. And he's also big on out-of-place archaeology. But a couple shows that I think you guys might really be interested in is of course, the one on out-of-place archaeology, and then him talking about biblical archaeology. Really interesting. We just had him on. He did part 2 of biblical archaeology last week, and phenomenal. And when he was talking about out-of-place archaeology, he referred to some books, and I could pull them up. There's a book that's actually online. It was written in 1832 or 1833, and it blew my mind. Back then, people were more accepting. I tend to think or wonder if archaeologists are keeping things from us, or our government's keeping things from us. But if you read this book, you think now we read something that doesn't fit, the square hole, the round peg doesn't fit the square hole, and we wonder, are these people saying it, doing this for fame? Are they controversy? Do they believe it? When you hear some of these wild claims. But in 1832, it was a different time. There wasn't TV stars and stuff, and you got to think that at least what this guy is talking about in this book, he believes. And really interesting, talked about mummies found in caves of Kentucky, and of course the giants. We've heard of the the Ohio giants and stuff, and a lot of different interesting stuff. But yeah, sorry about that, guys. I just wanted to share that with you.
One of my friends.
Look, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. You're the guest. Carry on.
I was saying that I follow a lot of that stuff, and I tend to believe in a lot of things that most people would might not believe in, and fortunately, there's a lot more people that are more open-minded about things. I was very close friends with astronaut Gordon Cooper, and astronaut Gordon Cooper was a believer in a lot of things. And you're talking about a man who's basically religious, very religious, and believed in God and Jesus. He was like a Christian. I'm not of any particular faith, but Gordon was a hardcore Christian, but he still was open-minded and believed that there were things that were unexplainable that he had seen and experienced in his lifetime that he verified and saw with his own eyes, and there was scientific proof that these things existed, and that's what we want to do with this area, because one of the things he always told me, don't fall in line and don't fall into the trap where you get pulled in with a bunch of people that are in it just to get 15 minutes of fame. Do your studying, make sure you collect the data, so that if you've got a bunch of people that are working against you on proving something that's not supposed to exist but actually does, you have substantial proof that they can't debunk, and get the top scientists to work with you. And that's what we hope to do with this area. This area is so incredible, and it spans. It's in the Bermuda Triangle. There's lots of weird things that have happened to me in the Bermuda Triangle throughout my years of going back and forth from work sites to home base that I have no explanation for, whether it's magnetic fields or whatnot. I don't know. But if this area within the Bermuda Triangle at 350 feet deep, which no one has ever been discovered before, if that area spans as large as we think, 10 miles or more, we believe that this may span from the central coast of Mexico as far down as Cuba. And if that's the case, that means this civilization was massive, massive. Not just a small Indian village, not an Aztec city, but much more massive. And people haven't discovered this because deep water divers, there are very few people, not even myself, as qualified to dive water at those depths for long periods of time. The people that I'm working with are trimix divers, rebreathers, working with top scientists, marine biologists, and archaeologists to study this area and to bring back findings of something that's miraculous. And if we happen to find a shipwreck while we're down there, I'll bring that up. And in the meantime, let's discover something amazing and share it with the world and uncover a story that's yet to have been told. And as far as we know, no one's discovered this because there's maybe 22,000 deep water divers in the world, and that may be a high number. Probably 95% of those are recreational divers, and the other divers either work for the Navy doing drill oil fields or whatever. But most people are not going to go out in the middle of the Bermuda Triangle and start diving reefs for fun or recreation. Most of that's done where tourists go to dive deep walls and caves and or cenotes. This area is unknown to anybody, and it's sitting there just waiting for a huge discovery to be made, and that's my next quest, that and treasure. So if treasure industry dies because of government organizations wanting to control it and build their own empire, then I'm moving on to this incredible discovery. I do them simultaneously because I think it's something that needs to be done. And I did a seminar up in the Bay Area and talked in detail about this and showed videos of it and photographs. And if you saw that, you'd be amazed. It's just amazing. I've never seen anything like it. And you're talking to a treasure hunter who's amazed by treasure all his life, and then I found something that even is pulling me to want to discover it and enlighten the scientific community of a possibility of an existence of a civilization that no one's ever documented before.
Wow, that is just amazing. You got to keep us updated on that for sure.
Oh, definitely.
I'm
not going to keep quiet about that one.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, I'm very curious, and I'll tell you, I'm really interested in out-of-place archaeology and the unknown. You said, Mr. Cooper, there were some things that, he had seen and had proven and things that were, pretty wild. Can you share any of that with us?
Well, on one of his space flights, he was looking for shipwrecks off the coast of Mexico. He ended up discovering the Olmec civilization, which dated back 5,500 years. That was one of his finds to kind of prove the theory that, he was able to locate something that had never been previously discovered. And that was back in 1969 when he made that discovery. And he gave that entire find to the country of Mexico. And now it wasn't their country, but he didn't request anything from it. And obviously, if we're going to go switch gears and go in that direction, Gordon was very forward about his belief in UFO sightings and encounters, and even delved into it a lot deeper into things that were unnatural or otherworldly, and he believed in that wholeheartedly. And somehow between the connection of this find of being an ancient civilization and Gordon's belief in UFOs, I all of a sudden am a discoverer of a flying saucer from another world. That's how that ended up going in that direction. Because I talked of Gordon's belief in otherworld entities and UFOs and whatnot. And look, he was a man who had access to military installations that you and I will never have access to. And the things that he told me and the things that he saw and experienced and witnessed are a lot like you hear on a lot of these shows that are trying to inform people that, there is something other than what we're being told.
Wow.
And Gordon was a proponent of that, and he was trying to do that in a way that people would think about it seriously. And I don't think that's any secret. And I intend to do the same. If it happened to me, the things that happened to him, I'd be doing the same thing. You got to do it scientifically, because the only way it's going to be respected, and if you do it in such a way to protect the actual finding that nobody can debunk, because you have substantial proof and evidence and scientific data that proves what you're saying, it's going to be a hard case for anybody to debunk or make look like a phony claim just to get 15 minutes of fame, because I don't need 15 minutes of fame. I was on TV for 2 years. Yeah, I'm doing this because I love what I do. Mm-hmm. And that's I think incredible. It's something that needs to be told. So, I mean, there's so many different worlds that I could go into with what Gordon told me in his life that would, pretty incredible stuff and things that I've been through. And this is the newest one between Treasure and this. I don't know what else I can do. I'm stuck.
Darrell, I don't know if you would be up for it, but we would love to have you on the show one time where we don't need to go farther into this because we're kind of veering off, but I would love to have do a show on kind of the unexplained stuff that we're talking about if you're up for it. We'll talk about it later. You don't have to answer now, but
yeah, sure.
I'd love that. We've had some pretty amazing people on here. We do metal detecting. We both metal detect. We're into that, but Treasure. It's a big thing. I mean, we're both interested in Treasure and like what you're doing, and we're both somewhat into paranormal, you could say, and out of place archaeology and explain it. I think most of us that that metal detect. We were the curious kids out playing outside and finding rocks and different things and curious about them. And so it's, we touch on a vast array of subjects and,
look, just because we're historians and explorers and we happen to stumble across something that's unexplainable doesn't mean that you're a wacko. And, because I love treasure hunting. I love history. And if this is part of it, that's just another chapter. So it all falls in the realm of exploring and hunting history. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So it's all part of it.
One of my friends we had on the station a few months back called Steve Mera, he's the editor and owner of Phenomena magazine, and he does a lot of things throughout the world. And one of the areas that he was very much involved of, he made the media in the UK a couple of years back. He went down to Peru. There was a childlike mummy found in Peru. Their DNA testing actually found that it wasn't. And but we had him on the show and spoke that, and it was fascinating, wasn't it, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. Very interesting. Yeah, he and I loved that. If you saw those bones and stuff, I thought it looked real. And he came on the show, and I mean, they went at it very scientific, and just discovered. I mean, and they were literally put their life, at stake by coming out and saying this is faked.
Yeah, so he had the Peruvian mafia intent on killing them because it was very much gangster driven and money orientated. The case, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Getting back to Cooper's Treasure and the program, what have you? The maps themselves. What percentage of the map that you've got, or the information you've got, do you think you've actually looked at up to now?
Well, see, if you take the sea chart, or the treasure map from Space as we coined it, the map itself is not all that valuable if you don't have the files. Because you take a large sea chart covering the most of the Caribbean down to South America and southern coast of the Carolinas, and you circle certain areas, and Gordon put numbers in those areas. That's great. That's 1 million square miles of ocean for each one of those circles. So what are you going to find there? Virtually nothing. But what happened to me was I had files, and each one of these files were numbered. I didn't have the chart. So what I needed was the chart that told me where file number 2 corresponded, which area to file number 2. I only had files. So I had files 1 through 16. If I pulled out file 12, I needed to know where is file 12 because it was illustrations and information and documentation of the findings that he found in that area. But I had no idea where in the heck file number 12, where it was in the Caribbean. So that's why I needed the sea chart. So the sea chart that I got from my dad had circles all over it with numbers inside these circles. And then I went, oh my God, number 12 is over here. No wonder. Because I remember in first season, I tried looking for one of the shipwrecks that Gordon outlined in a file, and I thought he was referring to Mexico, and I was off by 1,000 miles. Mm-hmm. I was looking in an area that had nothing to do with Mexico. Now, there were other files that he did assign to Mexico, but that wasn't one of them. And without the sea chart, I would have never known where those files were supposed to be, the area that they were supposed to be in. Because if you had just the files, you wouldn't find the treasure, except for maybe 2 of them. If you had the sea chart with all the circles and the numbers in it, you wouldn't find anything unless you were able to cover 1 million square miles in a week, then maybe, but that's impossible. So you had to have 2 in order to make it work. It was like a key and a lock.
Wow. That's
so
amazing.
That's what the map was. But the map is incredible because it's beautiful because you can imagine him coming down from space and he's super excited about his the records that he broke in space. But he's even more excited when he's done with all that. He goes back to his treasure hunting buddies and he goes, "You're not going to believe what I saw in space. And look at this picture. I know there's stuff here. I know there's stuff there. Let's get a sea chart. Grab a sea chart, Kip." Kip brings him a sea chart and he goes, "Okay, so this picture goes with that circle. Okay, this goes over here. All right, now we're going to have to go and investigate these areas. Just go check out that reef in that circled area." And then they go and they identify shipwreck material and they write files down. They write the information. They do their own hand-drawn illustrations. It's amazing. The story behind the story is what is the most amazing part about Cooper's treasure. And I'm probably the only guy on the entire planet Earth that's ever been given a file that relates to shipwrecks from an astronaut generating that information on a space flight. Imagine that. I don't think that's going to happen again. Albeit somebody might get a smart idea and go, "You know what? I might just do that. And I'll give it to my nephew. He'll be the next Cooper's treasure." So,
is he interested?
That's what's so fat. Who?
Your nephew.
Oh,
were you saying your nephew? I'm sorry, maybe I misunderstood what you were saying.
No, I was saying it would be funny if another astronaut gave it to his nephew. But yes, I have a bunch of friends. I don't know any other astronauts. They're all the ones that I knew are all dead. Mm-hmm. That's one thing. When you get older, you realize how many dead people you know.
Right.
And I know a lot more dead people now than I used to when I was young. But if there's another astronaut up there listening, and you got something else you're not, you see something, and I imagine technology is much more advanced than it was back then. If you see something you want me to go after, I raise my hand. I'll do it. So.
Yeah, I think it's incredible that this was the 60s, right? I mean, was it all in the 60s, or did he go up in the 70s?
It was 63 and 65.
Yeah.
1963 and his Gemini flight in 65.
Because I mean, you have to imagine, and I've seen the show, I've seen all the episodes. But towards the end of, and that's a question I have. Towards the end of the show, they almost start making it sound like maybe he was just looking out the ship and looking down. I mean, he had to have had some kind of sophisticated equipment.
Well, look, he did have the state-of-the-art camera equipment at that time. He also had in his possession several treasure coins that he took in space with him. He took those in space with him with the idea that, they all were allowed to bring personal effects, and then that way they could come home, and they all made extra money by selling off these personal items that were actually flown in space on their space flight.
Wow.
That was something regular that astronauts were permitted to do. And Gordon brought treasure coins with him, amongst a few other things, but he brought treasure coins up there. So he knew exactly what he was doing. He had a plan before he even launched himself into orbit that he was going to get a bird's eye view, take photographs of the area. He's killing two birds with one stone. He's taking the photographs in case there's a nuclear threat out there. And he was probably told to take pictures of everything that he flew over. And while he's looking at the pictures, he goes, there it is. That's that reef I was telling you about. How better view can you get it from up in space? Because what Gordon told me was he had 2010 vision, he had state-of-the-art camera equipment, and there's a certain point of magnification between the spacecraft and Earth that you get while you're in space. So it's like looking at a magnifying glass. I mean, there's accounts of him, watching smoke coming out of chimneys that he could see that.
Oh,
and
wow.
Gordon wasn't one to lie.
Right.
In fact, there's lots of letters that I have in my personal files that Gordon gave me. He gave me a lot of space memorabilia as gifts before his passing, too, throughout the years of our friendship. And I've come across a couple letters talking about his ability to see things from space and that it wasn't fake, because he used to tell people, I saw chimneys. I could see the smoke coming out of the chimney every time. What, are you nuts? You're 150 miles up in space. How can you see that? And then they proved that he was right, that there's a certain point of magnification while you're flying. So if that's the case, him finding a potential wreck on a particular reef zone that looked like it was in the middle of a Spanish thoroughfare, that's pretty obvious, especially if you know what you're looking for. And that's how he did it. That's the magic behind what he did.
That's amazing. I have a funny NASA story I want to share with you, and I don't know if it's true, but I think it's a great story. 20 plus years ago, an older gentleman was telling me, well, I say older, I'm getting up there now, but 20 years ago, he was saying that when he was a kid, his sister was quite a bit older than him. I think he was a teenager, 12, 13, somewhere in there. And his sister worked for NASA. Well, I am from the Dayton area, straight shot. I could do right Pat's 10 minutes away from where I grew up. And so, a lot goes on there, whatever. Well, the story goes that they were doing this testing. She was working with these astronauts, and she borrowed his bike for some kind of testing they were doing. And he reluctantly agreed, and he got really upset that they had it for weeks. And she brought it back to him, and it had, he said it would remind you of like training wheels, but these big, it's all custom made and stuff. And he was so mad that he had to take all those parts off so he could ride his bike again. And he kind of laughed, and he said, if I only would have known then what I know now, I would have never touched that bike again and just put it up. But I don't know if there's any, I can't confirm it, but what a great story.
Yeah, that is.
What kind of memorabilia do you have from his trips up into space? Can you tell us about a few?
Well, I have a bunch of memos, internal NASA memos that when they were given certain things, if they were going to, certain particular training procedures they had to go through the missions. And it's really neat because a lot of them, each astronaut that was delivered that pertained to that message would have to initial it. So I got Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, I got Deke Slayton, I got Wally Schirra, I got Gordon's, and many of the other astronauts that were in that early space program initialing it. In some cases, they put little notes. This is Bogart. I can't believe that got by us. Let's take the proper action to rescind this order, and like personal notes between them. And then, Alan Shepard saying, oh, yeah, I don't know how this got by us. Cooper, please see me. I mean, these little personal notes and these memos that he gave me, and these are all personal hand notes written by these astronauts. This is not a roto pen. I've got stuff like that and, news articles, and there's certain photographs that he had taken, and just amazing personal
That's
stuff.
neat.
And Gordon kept files on everything. The guy was so meticulous. His wife Susan has a series of booklets, notebooks that he would keep. It would say May 1969. He'd have one for each one of the month. And in that notebook, it would outline every day. It was like a calendar. And in there, he would write down friends visiting from Omaha, Nebraska. And then he'd give their names. We had dinner and we ate steak and potatoes, and he'd just talk about that. Oh, and then Colleen wanted nasal spray. So I go to the store and I go get her nasal spray. I mean, he's writing that little, everything in detail. He was meticulous about detail. So this is why you could see he came back with the idea that he was going to jot down this information that he found while he was in space with regards to shipwrecks. Everything that he ever did, he saved every file. I went into his widow's home, Susan Cooper's, and she had a garage, an entire 2-car garage filled to the ceiling with all of the material and files that Gordon had saved over the years. It was just amazing to see. It's like a museum. Unfortunately, It wasn't displayed like one, but it was interesting to go through that. And when I was so lucky to have shared an office with Gordon for about 7 years, and for us to, he would show me files and he'd go, "Oh, you want this? Here, you can take that." And I go, "Oh my God, that's beautiful! Wow, where'd you get that? Mind if I have that one?" "Yeah, go ahead, take it. I got another one." That's how he ended up giving me these things in pieces. And it was before he passed that after we tried to set up an expedition in Bahamas initially, then we tried to do one in Mexico. We actually did an expedition in Mexico together. We tried to set one up in Central America, which we never got to finish. But Gordon always told me, "Man, if anything ever happens to me, I want you to finish what I've started. And I'm going to give you these files." And those files were the numbered files that I told you. Now, I didn't have the sea chart at that time because he'd already given that to my father. And that's the story behind the story. And that's how I got access to the files. And one day in October of 2004, he just had a heart attack and just died. He was just getting ready to walk his dog, and he just fell on the floor. And lucky for me, I'd been friends with him those years in the office, sharing office together. We did everything together. We talked about girls. He used to help me talk about girls. He used to help me talk about airplanes, boats, cars, treasure, space, visiting kings and queens and presidents, and all the secret little stories between, and inventions and aliens and UFOs. And I mean, you can imagine, I wanted to stay in that office 7 days a week. I wasn't married at the time. I couldn't have found a better, perfect partner to just hang out with, and every single day. And actually, I think it was our relationship that motivated him. He saw my enthusiasm for exploration and treasure and all of that made him feel like he was young again. And I would go, "Come on, Gordon, let's go to Mexico. I'll introduce you to the governor of Campeche. We can go down there. Let's talk treasure with him, because I know this guy's an avid diver." We did. We found out that he was an avid diver. He lets us use his airplane, and we look for shipwrecks with the governor's airplane.
Oh, wow.
Those are the things that I would make Gordon do. He would go, "Oh, you know what? These guys over at Star Trek invited me over to see the set of Star Trek Next Generation, or whichever, or Voyager." And I go, and he goes, "You want to come?" "Are you kidding me? Of course, let's go." And he would take me to places, and I would take him to places, and pretty soon everybody goes, "Is that your son?" And everybody goes, the other people who knew him goes, "Wait, Gordon only has daughters." "No, that's my nephew." So he used to call me his nephew, which I was pretty happy about.
Oh,
I go, "Yeah, that's my uncle." And he kind of filled that void where my dad kind of left me in the dark for so many decades. So
Darrell,
that's why I was so happy.
I'm sorry. Do you think that there was a reason he gave you part of the key to his treasure and your dad the other half? Do you think that there was some kind of motivation behind that, or?
Well, the motivation initially was to go to the Bahamas. I don't think he was going to give my dad the files, because he had one wreck in particular that he was going after, and it was the same wreck that we were going after in season 2, something that was related to Sir Francis Drake. there was a discovery made out there. They found a gold table, and whether that was actually related or pertained to Sir Francis Drake, I don't know. But it was found while they were following up information on Sir Francis Drake. That was the only wreck that we were going after. And my dad actually he gave Gordon, I think he gave him $8,000 for that sea truck. He goes, look, Gordon, I'm going to give you money. I want to keep this. Give me the thing. And Gordon said, okay. Because we were working together. We all had a contractual arrangement to work together. So when we weren't able to get the lease, my dad kept that. But what Gordon didn't give him was a bunch of files, because he had already identified the one wreck that we were going after in the Bahamas. I don't think he totally wanted to relinquish all of the information to my dad at that time, or to anybody. Yeah. It was just a buildup of a relationship by sharing an office with him that gave him the confidence, well, shoot, Roger's gone. Because as soon as that didn't happen in the Bahamas, my dad just kind of disappeared. Well, shoot, I don't need Gordon anymore. I guess I don't have to move on. And he left me with Gordon, and my dad even, he just wasn't around anymore. And he stayed in Bahamas, and me and Gordon stayed in California. And he ended up trusting me because I pulled him into other expeditions that we worked on together. And he figured, well, who else am I going to give it to? I'm not going to give it to Roger. He doesn't even call me anymore.
I gotcha. So no motivation.
That's how it happened.
Okay, no motivation between.
There wasn't. It was just like, who else is he going to give it to? He didn't know anybody else at that time that was enthusiastic about treasure hunting other than me. All his treasure hunting buddies from the 60s were dead. There wasn't anybody else left.
And you were pretty much his family anyhow, so it just makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what who else is he going to give it to? He wasn't going to give it to his daughters because they didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
And his wife wasn't interested in it, so it probably would have stayed in some box, disappeared, collected dust, and been thrown out eventually.
Right. Wow. Glad you got a hold of it.
Yeah, me too.
Absolutely. Dave, you disappeared on us. You good?
No. You know me, Mike, when you're talking and other people are talking, I'm shut up and listen.
I think
it takes sound a while to get this far from Europe,
Yeah.
He's been talking the whole time. We
right.
Got sound out of the right.
That's funny. Dave, you got any other questions?
Do you know, Mike, I haven't. As I said to you at the start of the show, I do have questions, but I suspect Darrell will be able to carry on the show with getting the questions, getting the answers out before I ask them. And
has he been doing that?
Certainly superseded me. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, Dad. Honestly, you've been it's better to have somebody on board who's able to talk constantly. I mean, you've probably done podcasts and radio shows a million times now, so it comes out effortlessly. So it's easier for you to answer the questions before they come out, and I just throw a few curveballs here and there.
Okay.
Yeah, I told you that's how he was. You just let him go because he'll tell you it all. I was I was really impressed having you on when we had you on the U.S. show, and Dave, he's such a big fan. I really wanted to try to get you on this show because I knew he would really enjoy it. And so yeah, is there anything else you got, Darrell? Excuse me.
Yeah, I was going to ask our buddy Dave. You think anybody in the royal family listens to this podcast?
I certainly hope so. If not, I'll have a word.
Say hello to the Queen for me, and the Prince and Princess.
Probably the closest I would get. I holiday quite regularly at a place called Anglesey, which is a small island off in North Wales, and Kate Middleton and Prince William have a home there. So where we do when we're on the island camping and whatnot, where we go shopping, they go shopping, but I've not bumped into them yet.
Okay, well, if you do bump into her, tell them I said hello.
Oh, certainly will. No worry about that.
I thought you all everybody over there had tea with the Queen like once a week. That doesn't happen?
I'm Dave Saddler, and I don't get invited to nothing. I upset people in.
I gotcha.
No, he's too busy. He's way too busy.
Yeah, right.
No time
yes, I work for a company that make heavy machinery, backhoes and low doors and such like. So I'm there. Well, I was there till I got in about 20 minutes before the show tonight because overtime. So I was. You probably know what machines I'm on about. I won't give them any big upping. So yeah, I'm busy.
Good deal. Well, guys, I'm ready to wrap it up if we got everything out and Dave doesn't have any more questions.
No, honestly, Darrell, it's been an absolute pleasure. The opportunity to speak to you that Mike gave, I was excited as straight away. I have watched the programs. I do love the programs. As I say, I can specifically remember that clip from the show with your father over in the UK many years ago, and it's brought a lot of memories back to me about my dad being able to speak to you and discussing days gone by. So thank you very much for the honour of speaking. Look, I didn't go sycophantic either.
Yeah, hey, I enjoy it, and anytime you guys want me to talk on the podcast, I enjoy this. It's not something that I hate doing at all. As long as I got the time to do it, I'm willing to share stories. And like I said, watch out for what's coming next, because we're not finding a spaceship, but we're going to find something else that's pretty miraculous.
As soon as you have the next series, whatever it may be, commissioned, again, please come on and talk all about it and promote the show as much as you want.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And thank you, guys. I really appreciate it.
Oh, Darrell, thank you so much for coming on. It's our pleasure.
All right, guys.
Thank you.
Well, you guys have a good day, and go to bed. I know it's got to be late there.
It's 20 to 10 at night. I'm up at 4:30 in the morning for work, so I'll be going straight to bed. Thank you very much.
All right, guys.
Good night, Dave. Thank you, Darrell.
Good night, both. Thanks again.
Care.
Thank you all for tuning in. Good night.
The Archaeology and Metal Detecting magazine acts as a hub for information, offering articles from archaeologists, detectorists and other specialists throughout the genre, featuring many links, event info and news articles associated to archaeology and metal detecting. We also offer professional review services and promotion for books, resources, videos, documentaries, gadgets, equipment and much more. The magazine is run by the archaeological and metal detecting community for the archaeological and metal detecting community. So come visit us at archmdmag.com, that's archmdmag.com, and check out information from our media section with all the latest content, news from the Archaeology channel, podcasts and the YouTube channels that feature the now legendary Digger Dawn, The Man with the Hat and Archeo Duck, just to name a few. If you would like to offer an article, link or inquire about other services, then pay us a visit at archmdmag.com and drop us a line.